So Donald Trump's defense team will continue its cross-examination of Michael Cohen tomorrow as it tries to discredit the prosecution's key witness in the former president's criminal hush money trial. NBC News senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett has the latest.
Donald Trump's defense team tearing into the prosecution's star witness, suggesting Mr. Trump's self-described fixer turned fierce Trump critic Michael Cohen is out for revenge on his former boss. Do you want President Trump to get convicted in this case? Trump attorney Todd Blanche asking. Sure, Cohen acknowledged. Cohen confirming he recently said the former president belongs in a cage like an animal. The defense trying to cast Cohen as motivated to lie, that he previously fed prosecutors dirt on Mr. Trump to get out of prison early, and that now his financial livelihood, including media appearances and podcasts, centers on trashing Mr. Trump. Cohen acknowledging he's made more than $3 million off his books Disloyal and Revenge, and that he had been going on TikTok 6 days a week to slam his former boss to paid subscribers. Saying of his past praise of Mr. Trump, quote, "At that time, I was knee-deep into the cult of Donald Trump." The defense getting Cohen to admit he previously described himself as obsessed with Mr. Trump, insinuating he was jilted once pushed outside the Trump orbit. The state's case largely depending on jurors believing Cohen's word, as he's the only witness who said the former president knew his internal records were falsified to cover up Cohen's payment of an adult film actress before the 2016 election. Mr. Trump has pleaded not guilty to those low-level felony charges.
We had a very good day. I think we're exposing this scam for what it is. Thank you very much.
Earlier today, the prosecution questioning Cohen, who told the jury these invoices seeking repayment for services rendered in 2017 were false records, and that the retainer agreement he references never existed. Prosecutors guiding Cohen through check after check with the retainer language included. All false statements, he said, because they weren't for valid legal fees, but reimbursements for the hush money. Cohen describing a meeting with Mr. Trump at the White House in 2017 where he posed for this picture. Cohen says they discussed Mr. Trump reimbursing him for paying off Stormy Daniels, an arrangement developed by Trump Organization CFO Alan Weisselberg months earlier. I was sitting with President Trump and he asked me if I was okay. He asked me if I needed money and I said, no, all good. He said, because I can get a check. I said, no, I'm okay. He said, all right, just make sure you deal with Alan, Cohen testifying. Later saying he was frightened when the FBI raided his home and office in 2018, saying Mr. Trump told him, don't worry, I'm the president of the United States. Stay tough, which Cohen took to mean don't flip. But Cohen says he turned against Mr. Trump after consulting with his family. My wife, my daughter, my son all said to me, we're supposed to be your first loyalty. Cohen has been disbarred and convicted of lying under oath, and the defense zeroing in on his motives. Trump attorney Blanche asking Cohen if he was motivated by fame. Cohen suggesting that's not fair to say. Blanche then quoting this excerpt from Cohen's book, quote, I wanted it all, power, the good life, public acclaim, fame. Those are my words, Cohen said. Yes.
Interesting. Joining us now, NBC News legal analyst and former federal prosecutor Andrew Weissmann. Andrew, obviously this continues tomorrow, but so far, how has Michael Cohen fared for the prosecution and also for the defense? Your thoughts?
He's been quite remarkable. I think that a lot of us on MSNBC have seen him up close and personal, and he can be at times volatile and strong-willed and displays a thin skin, and he's not showing any of that. I was in court observing him, and he was really, so far, he has been a model witness on direct and on cross-examination. The one thing I would note for viewers is a slight difference in my take from Laura's excellent presentation, which is Michael Cohen does give incredibly damning evidence, and he does have direct evidence with respect to the former president being involved in this scheme, and he has direct conversations. But I don't think it's fair to say that he provides the only evidence with respect to Donald Trump and his connection to this case. I think you have to think of both direct and circumstantial evidence. And there really is a mountain of circumstantial evidence. And Michael Cohen isn't even the only person who has direct evidence. For instance, Donald Trump signs the checks for the reimbursement payments, and it's not just $130,000, it's $260,000 because they're disguising it, according to the DA, as legal fees. And so there really is substantial corroboration and independent evidence aside from Michael Cohen, who certainly is an important witness, but I don't think in any way is a critical witness.
So since you were in the courtroom, Andrew, I'm just curious if you had any sense of how the jury was reacting or not reacting. Were they bored? Were they intrigued? And how he was connecting with the jury, if at all. And of course, this comes down to, as Joyce reminded us in the last hour, the jury. I mean, it's their call on whether he is guilty of the two things, the election interference and the actual fraud with the records. If that seemed to be landing, as opposed to all the drama around their relationship that's coming out.
You know, reading the jury is always a hard thing, and you just never know. And so the one thing I will say from looking at the jurors is they are extremely attentive. They're not dozing off like the defendant seems to be with his eyes closed very frequently. They are looking at the witness. They're looking at the documents as they come in. I would say the last hour of Michael Cohen's direct testimony was pretty riveting because he was looking, by and large, directly at the jurors, and the jurors were looking directly at him as he talked about his prior crimes, what he did, how he feels about that, why he decided to plead guilty and break from what he called the Trump cult. And so that was quite a remarkable moment. You know, the witness stand and the jury box are very close to each other. They're much closer than where the defendant is, Donald Trump, to the witness stand or the jury box. So they really can see each other very close. And so that was certainly a dramatic moment, but you don't know until the end. We won't know, and that's why there's trials are so dramatic. We don't know really how this is landing with the jurors, but they certainly are paying very close attention.
Right.
Andrew, we know where Allen Weisselberg is physically. He's in Rikers. But will he be called to the stand? Should he be called to the stand, given the testimony thus far involving Allen Weisselberg?
Great question. I think that the real issue is, will there be an explanation for where he is given to the jurors? We all know that the reason he is not a witness is because he is behind bars, having pleaded guilty to lying in the civil fraud case where he and Donald Trump were found liable. And so it's fair to infer he lied in that case to both protect himself and Donald Trump with respect to those charges. And so I think what's really important is it's important for the jurors to know why he has not been called as a witness. Presumably, he would assert the Fifth Amendment and not testify voluntarily. So that would happen outside the presence of the jury. I think one way to remedy this is the court can give an instruction to the jurors saying, you are not to consider why certain witnesses were not called, and you cannot consider that in your jury deliberations. That would apply to Allen Weisselberg. It would apply to the bodyguard, Keith Schiller, who was, according to Stormy Daniels, right outside the room when she said the sexual encounter occurred. He is the person who received the checks and invoices when he was at the White House with Donald Trump. So the judge could explain that they're not to speculate as to why those witnesses were not called.
So Andrew, why is Keith not being called?
I assume that he is somebody who the prosecutors, again, I'm speculating, but a good prosecutor would try to get him to cooperate and would try to see if he would testify. I would assume that he asserted the Fifth Amendment. And I don't mean that to pejoratively. We all have a right to do that if
Everybody
there is
does, yeah.
an answer. Exactly. And so I would assume if I were his defense counsel, that's something that I would advise him to do, at which point the prosecutors have to decide whether they would immunize him and thus not prosecute him in exchange for his testifying. And I could see why they might not be willing to do that, given what they know about his closeness and involvement with Donald Trump. And also, you can immunize somebody and they could still lie and not tell the truth.
All right, former federal prosecutor Andrew Weissmann, as always, thank you so much. So Donnie, you know Michael Cohen very well, and you have for quite some time. I'm sure you observed him yesterday in the courtroom. What did you see?
You know, let me just back up a little bit. You know, that anybody who thinks that Michael was going to get rattled or Michael was not ready for this, I remember sitting in Otisville with him many times where he was preparing for this. This is his moment. And the thing about Michael, and people forget also, is Donald Trump has been through how many attorneys? Yet Michael Cohen was his personal attorney for 10 years and kept that job. He's really good. He's really good on his feet. And he's also very likable. I would not be surprised if he is not really connecting with the jury. There's something about him, and the Rev knows him, that, yes, he did all this stuff for Trump, but you kind of feel like the guy was duped into it and whatnot. And I really believe that he's connecting. I really believe that this is his moment. And the other thing, yes, they're going to paint him and say, yes, he lied. But everything is corroborated. They have not left anything to chance here. It's not like, take my word for it. He speaks, they put the checks up there. He speaks, he put the other document up there. So when you combine his ability on the stand, which so far by anybody's scorecard, he's getting an A, with the corroborating evidence, I think he's very formidable.
And Rev, you know Michael Cohen as well.
No, I know him. You know, in the years that we would deal with Trump, some mostly adversarial, he was the guy that kind of walked to you and said, look, he's not that bad a guy. He was a true believer. And when he got in trouble, he called me and said, would you meet me and have prayer with me? And I met him. I was a little skeptical about what it was because we met at the Regency, and this is wide open. But he really convinced me that he's, you know, I was telling him everything will be all right. As a minister, you comfort people. He said, no, Rev, I'm going to jail. He says, be clear. He said, but my kids don't deserve this. And I think his family turned him around. And even when he went to jail, he would send messages to me, please call my son, which I did. So I think he was a guy that realized he was in a cult. He was in a situation that he admired somebody who wasn't worthy of that. And I was very much convinced that with the composure and conviction that he went on that stand, he was not going to let them provoke him because of his family. He's standing up to redeem his family and what he felt it was his commitment to them.
I heard that when he was talking about his family, that the jury was very, very connected to him. He started to talk about that supposedly some of the jurors' tears welled up, but that's what I've been hearing.
Wow.
Michael Cohen back on the stand in about 2 hours from now, still under cross-examination. Tomorrow he'll be back on the stand. Day off today, back on the stand tomorrow.